Hi there, and welcome to Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast on iTunes and even here on video on my YouTube channel. Listen, I am really excited to be able to share with you this episode of a success interview. As you know, if you have followed me or you download my podcast, you know that I interview high achievers in a variety of different fields, right? And you know what? These are great opportunities to glean insight and ideas from these high achievers. And my guest today is no different. His name is Fabrizio Poli. He is an aviation entrepreneur. He is a jet pilot. He is an author of several books, and he is a futurist. And you know what? What a great guy. I've been able to get to know him over the last several months as we're going to be doing some projects together. And what a great guy he is. He's smart, he's energetic, he's motivating, he's entertaining. And you know what? We had a great conversation, but he's the one that pushed me to do this video. You see, if you're already a subscriber to my Unleash Your Greatness Within podcast, you know that I do it basically over my audio system here, right? You know that I'll give tidbits and ideas of success principles, or I'll interview high achievers just over the phone lines, if you will. But you know what? It was Fabrizio yesterday that said, "Hey, TJ, I live in England, you live in Seattle. Why don't we do it over video? Would you be open to that?" And I said, "Hey, brother, I've never done it before, so you can coach me through it. I would love to do it." So that's what we ended up here in this interview. So I just wanted to say, if you're watching this video on my YouTube channel, I invite you to go to iTunes and subscribe to my podcast channel, all right, called Unleash Your Greatness Within. And if you're listening to this because you downloaded the podcast of this interview, listen, I invite you to go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to that under TJ Hoisington or under Greatness Within, but TJ Hoisington's a safe place. All right, I wish you the best. May you unleash your greatness within. I hope you enjoy this interview. In the beginning, we talk about a little bit about Fabrizio's background, some obstacles that he ran into, some things that he ran into that he had to adjust along the way. But one thing is clear as you go through this, he knew exactly what his passions were. He knew where he wanted to go. Later on in the interview, we get into some specific steps of success. He talks about the cube. He talks about the acronym for action and how it applies to success. So listen to this whole interview from beginning to end. I think it'll be really useful for you. All right, let's jump right into the interview. Welcome, Fabrizio.
Okay, thanks, TJ.
All right, so here's, I think, the best thing to do to start, and that is, why don't you share a little bit of your story? What's your background? Where were you born? Give us a little insight into your background.
Yeah, well, my dad was Italian, and he came from a small village called Santa Maria in the middle of Italy. And when he was 20, he was working in a hotel, and his boss said to him, "You're wasted here. You need to go to England because that's where you will be able to become who you were designed to become and do great things." So he said, "Well, I don't speak English. I don't know anybody in English. So don't worry, I'll make a phone call as a friend of mine may be able to help you out." So my dad lands in 1965 in London, speaking no English, with £5 in his pocket, which is about $5. And there he is, and he starts working as one of the many assistant chefs at the Savoy Hotel in London, which is one of the top hotels in London. But one of the many assistant chefs, like they had like 50 of them. So he was basically cutting the potatoes. That's what he was doing. So anyway, so he starts, and as a lot of Italian guys did in the 1960s and even today, he was going to the nightclubs to meet girls, and he met my mother, who was an English girl, and they met and they started dating. And my mother was a hairdresser. So my father used to go and pick my mother up at work sometimes, and he noticed that her boss wasn't a very bright guy, but he had 5 hairdressing salons and drove a Porsche. So my father immediately thought, well, I've always fancied hair. Maybe I'll become a hairdresser. So he started going to school, and so he was waiting tables at night and doing the chef thing as well to make the money. And then during the day he was going to school. He eventually graduated, and then Vidal Sassoon, who was the number one guy in London at the time in the 60s, he was looking for apprentices, but you had to pay to be his apprentice for 6 months. So my father said, well, I'll give it a shot. And everybody said to him, oh, no, you crazy. You're not Jewish, for number one. Your English isn't very good. They'll never hire you. They only hire Jewish guys that speak English. So he went over, and Vidal said, yes, come along. So my father paid to work for 6 months. But at the end of the 6 months, he really made an impression on Vidal that Vidal hired him as his personal apprentice.
Oh, wow.
So my father was straight under Vidal Sassoon, learned very quickly the Vidal Sassoon way, and rose through the ranks to general manager of all the European salons and that. We spent time in the US and everything. So I was born in England, spent time in England, then in the US, then we came back to Europe. My father opened a number of salons for Vidal in Europe, Munich salon, the salons in Milan. And then Vidal asked my dad to move to Milan for a couple of years just to get things up and running. And then while things were up and running, I was going to the international school. So that was a great experience for me because I was in school with kids from all over the world. And so that opened my mind. And I'd already done a lot of traveling. And there I was only 8 years old. And I lived in 3 countries already on 2 different continents, mixing with kids from all different countries. So then my father left the Vidal Sassoon Corporation to set up his own brand, and did that for a while. So I saw my father go from employee to entrepreneur, and sort of start working with all the fashion designers where they used to do the clothes. I mean, my dad was friends with Giorgio Armani, so Giorgio Armani would design the clothes. My dad would design the hair, and they'd be on the front cover of all these top magazines around the world. Then my father got to tour Japan and China, teaching Chinese and Japanese hairdressers his way of cutting hair, which was a modified Vidal Sassoon style, sure, you want to call it. So I grew up in seeing my father do that. But while I was growing up, we were also jumping on and off airplanes all the time. And I just had a fascination for these flying machines and for space. And I wanted to be an astronaut. So at 12 years old, I go and see my science teacher, Mr. Hadfield. I said, Mr. Hadfield, what do I need to do to become an astronaut? He said, I don't know. And he said, write to NASA. And he thought, just write to them and they'll know. And 2 weeks later, they replied. So I go to school all very happy with this letter from NASA, from the director of NASA, and he'd written to me. And he said, NASA wrote to you? I said, yeah. So what did they say? Well, they said there's 2 avenues. Or you become a pilot, or you become a scientist. Well, I don't really fancy the scientist bit, but I could see myself being a pilot. So I shot down that route and wanted to get in the military. And while I was doing this, I actually met some real astronauts. And I got to speak to them. Now, bear in mind, I was born in 1969, which is when man landed on the moon for the very first time. And so I thought that when I was going to be in my 40s, we would not only be going to Mars, but we'd be going beyond. Because you think, the Wright brothers flew in 1903. So between 1903 and 1969, in just 66 years, we went from like a 20-meter flight to going to the moon and back. So I thought, by the time I'm 40, we'll be shooting out to the stars. And I'll be on one of those spaceships. Well, here we are in 2017. We haven't even been back to the moon yet. So while I was along this journey, my whole idea of becoming an astronaut, I mean, they always ask you the question, why? Why do people do what they do? Why do people want to achieve a certain goal? Well, in my case, I wanted to be like Captain Kirk. Oh. And I wanted to, visit the galaxies and the stars and meet people from other planets. Well, that didn't happen. So I thought, what's the next best thing? Meet people from other countries by flying a plane. So I then became a civilian pilot. I tried to get in the military over here in England. They didn't take me. I wasn't good enough. At the time, they were taking very few people. It was very difficult to get in. I tried. They offered me a position as air traffic controller. I turned around to the officer and said, look, I'm not going to sit in a chair all day watching other guys do the flying. I want to do the flying. So if you won't let me do it, I'll have somebody else let me do it. And so anyway, I went off and did my training. I had to make the money myself. So I taught English as a foreign language, which was a good experience because I taught air traffic controllers. I taught high-profile executives English, and that gave me an insight into their businesses because these people were learning English to do business. And so they would show me around their companies, tell me what they were doing, what orders and what deals they were working on. Sometimes I'd act as interpreter for these people sitting at the table with these big deals. And I was learning as we went along. I mean, I remember working for 5 days in a trade fair, being the interpreter for this light company. And in the end, I was doing the deals for them. So I was selling containers of lights. And at the end of the 5 days, the owner of the company turned around and offered me a job. And he said to me, Fabrizio, forget the pilot thing. Come and work for me. You'll make a great, sales guy for lights. And I said, I'm not interested. I want to fly planes. And then a few months later, the Gulf War broke out. And this agency that I'd worked with in the past rang me up. I said, I've got a job for you working for TV. Can you translate what CNN are saying into Italian? and you'll probably end up having a career in television as a TV host or stuff like that. And so I said to the guy, well, I'm teaching English at the moment. I've got all these clients I'm teaching, and I'm making good money. And he said, oh, we'll pay you good money. How much? And he almost doubled what I was going to have. I said, yeah, but, there's no guarantee that, after 3 months that the war's over, that I'm still going to be employed there. And, but you should forget the pilot thing. You can do the TV thing. I said, I'm not interested. I just want to fly jets and make as much money as possible, because more money I make, sooner I get closer to flying the jet. So I was like, and the guy says to me, you're a mercenary. Yes, I am.
Yeah. Dude, you were doggone focused. I mean, look at the passion. One thing after another, you turned away opportunities. You're like, no, this is what I really want to do.
I mean, I had friends ringing me up saying, you want to come on a double date tonight? No, can't afford a girlfriend right now. I need to stay focused. Yeah, I just couldn't care less, because, I just needed to, because my dad said to me, you can live at home, go out there, make the money, put all the money in the bank, and then when you're ready, go off to the US and do your training. And so he focused me, I focused myself, and I just went at it. And so I was working like 10, 12 hours a day. Anybody needed an English? And then the other thing, I was charging people a lot of money. And I was like 20, 21 years old. I remember going in to see this top executive of this company. And he turns around and he says to me, you're very young. I said, yes. I said, well, shouldn't I hire someone that's 35 to teach me? I said, excuse me, sir. It's not about experience. It's about performance. I can guarantee you one thing, and I can give you a long list of people that are having lessons with me right now. And they'll get results with me, because I was using neuro-linguistic programming to teach people English. And so they were learning a lot quicker with me than anybody else. I mean, one of my classes, I was teaching for Oxford Institutes, and they had like 30 schools all over the country. My class was the number one in the whole country. And I never spoke a word of Italian to my class. There were 14 people in the class. I spoke English from day one. And these were beginners. They spoke no English whatsoever. And they complained to the head teacher that I wouldn't speak a word of Italian. They didn't even think I could speak Italian until at the end of the test. I spoke in Italian, fluent Italian to them. And then, you mean you speak fluent Italian? And I said, look, guys, you got the top score in the country right now, so don't complain to me. I obviously know what I'm doing. So anyway, so when I would go to these top executives and shoot high number, some would say yes, some would say no. And I'd say, look, you want performance? Then I'm your guy. Forget the age thing. Otherwise, and this is the price. Performance costs money. And some would say yes, some would say no. But by doing that and adopting this type of attitude, it took me a lot less time to make the money I needed. Otherwise, I would have been working like 5 hours to make what I was making in 1 hour.
No, it's true.
Okay, so at the end of the day, I was delivering the value. So, I mean, I wasn't just charging them more money.
All right, so a couple thoughts. Number one, Vidal Sassoon. Let me take you back a little bit.
Yep.
I've often shared the story of Vidal Sassoon realizing his Cockney accent wasn't going to take him very far, and how he went to that special speech therapist on the other side of London.
My dad went to the same speech therapist.
Are you serious?
Because there's my dad with this heavy Italian accent, and you're in Bond Street. You're in like the most posh street in London. The most posh people in London. All the celebrities are all going there for their hair. They all go there to have their haircut. Mary Quant used to go and have her haircut there. Mia Farrow had her haircut there. All these people. And so my dad had to be dressed in a suit, and he had to speak the Queen's English. But he had a heavy Italian accent. So he saw Vidal going for these lessons, and he said, what are you going there for? Oh, because I have a Cockney accent. I need a pure Queen's English accent. So my dad said, okay, I'll go along too. In fact, I still have the tapes of my dad repeating going to this. Yeah.
It's such a small world. You and I have kind of become friends over the last few months, and this has been really cool. But to think that I've been sharing that story about Vidal Sassoon for years about, it was Abraham Lincoln that once said, if I had 8 hours to cut down a tree, I'd spend 6 sharpening my axe. And so I've always thought Vidal Sassoon was a good example of that. And so is your dad, which leads me into your dad. For him to say, son, go out, go for your dreams. You can live at home at no charge, put the money in the bank, and then when you're ready to go, you can go. So it seems like your dad was a believer in dreams and in possibilities and so forth.
When he left Italy, my grandmother, who'd never been anywhere else to this small village called Santa Maria, she said to him before he left to come to England, she said, you're going to a big city now in a foreign land where you're going to be learning a new language. I said, what you need to do is look for the successful people, hang out with them. Don't hang out with the losers. Hang out with the successful people. Wherever you go, whatever you decide to do, and you'll learn faster, quicker, and you'll be successful that way. This was a lady. My grandmother was a farmer.
Yeah.
She'd never been anywhere. She didn't even speak Italian. She spoke dialect.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, from this small village. She spoke. In fact, when I spoke to her, I struggled a bit because I don't speak her dialect. So that was so. But this lady, she's very humble. Nonna Tomasina, she was called, and Nonna Tomasina, she gave some sound advice. She gave that advice to my dad. I applied it in my life. I'm telling my kids right now, same thing. Remember Nonna Tomasina, what she said? Look out for the successful people and hang out with those guys.
It's so true. All right, real quick, you just triggered another question. Your kids, you have 4 kids.
Correct.
What are the ages? And
well,
what do they got?
Benjamin's the oldest. He's just turned 17 the other day. And then cool. I've got Aaron, my second son, who's 14. And then Nike, my third son, is 12. And Kayla, my daughter, who's 9.
Oh, that's awesome. So, Kyla or Kayla?
Kayla.
Okay, I have a Kyla.
Oh, okay, there you go. That's similar,
awesome. Yeah. All right, that's cool stuff. Yeah. All right, so you left off with saying you were over in America, you were teaching the Italian, right?
Yeah, in Italy. I was teaching Italians to speak English, yeah.
You were teaching, and you were saying you were working with executives and so forth, and they were like, you're too young, and you're like about performance, and I got thinking that triggered the thought that, yeah, I was like 22 years old, and I'd go in as a motivational speaker or work with executive teams, and I could sense that they were looking at me like, this kid is too young to be able to present anything of value to me.
Yeah.
But you don't give up, and look where you're at, and you never give up, and you keep going, and eventually all the stars align. So tell me more your story.
Yeah, so I then came back from the United States, and unfortunately it was a bad timing because there was a financial crisis just after the first Gulf War, 1992, and they were laying a load of pilots off. So there's me with 300 hours of flight time competing with guys with 5,000 hours. They're not going to even look at me. But I was lucky enough through the people that because I taught 4 classes of air traffic controllers. One of the air traffic controllers introduced me to a guy that managed a jet for this owner. And I managed to get on that jet and start flying when everybody else was... They didn't pay me. I didn't get any money for 2 years, but I was clocking up jet time all the time. And the guy I was flying with was actually an airline pilot that on his days off would come and fly with me. So he taught me to fly the airline way, even though I was flying this private jet. So when I then joined the airlines, I was the best first officer because I didn't have to learn the airline way because I already knew the airline way. And but during that time, which was 5 years, a long time, I applied at every single airline in the world. They all turned me down because they said I didn't have enough experience. But I was clocking up the jet time every right. week. I was doing a couple of hours.
Were you married at this point?
No, I wasn't married yet. No, okay. Yeah, I was single. So I was hanging around the airport. I ended up falling into a job doing marketing for an FBO, which is a private jet terminal. So I did that. And that allowed me to meet some new people. Then they wanted to set up a private jet flight brokerage thing. So I did that. I then left that, ended up flying for a company where they needed help in the office as well. So there I am, answering the phone, getting the phone call for the flight, writing the quote, sending it out, organizing the flight plans, and then going and doing the flying. So I'm doing the whole thing. I'm selling the flight, I'm planning the flight, I'm booking the hotels for the pilots, which one of them is me, and then I'm getting on the plane and I'm flying it as well. So, but I was like 22, 23 years old doing all this, and it's, it gave me a very broad view of aviation. I even sold my first jet at 23 years old.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I ended up meeting a guy who said, I've got a jet for sale. Do you know anybody? And I started thinking, so wait a minute, I know this guy in the US. I rang him up. I said, do you happen to have anyone that wants to buy this type of airplane? Just send me the information. And by that time we're using fax machines. So I'm sending him a fax. And a few weeks later, he gets back to me, says, yes, this guy I know wants to buy the plane. And then I ended up getting this hefty commission. So then the aircraft sales guy, he turns around and says to me, Fabrizio, forget the flying. Come and work for me selling jets. You'll make a lot more money. And I said, no, I want to fly jets. I don't want to sell jets. I just sold this because I happened to be there at the right time.
Right.
Yeah. But, all this gave me experience. And then I got married. And I was freelancing private jets at the time and still looking for the airline job. And then you know what happened? In the space of 2 days, I had 3 offers from 3 different airlines. And these are actual offers on the table, contracts.
Right.
And one airline, it was the 3rd time I went for the selection. And it's very difficult to get in. I topped the list. I was number 1. The chief pilot called me twice. He said, Fabrizio, so you're coming? He said, just to let you know, you're number 1 on the list out of 10 guys. And they went through like 100 people and they were hiring 10 and I was number 1. The other times I didn't get to number 1. I turned him down. And I made the most illogical choice, which was a startup airline, because I said to myself, I want to be part of a startup airline because one day I want to have my own aviation company.
Yep.
So if I get into a startup, I'm going to see what happens. And so I got in, I ended up helping with the flight manuals. I helped recruit some foreign pilots. I helped set up, because I knew a lot about personal development as well. Because while all this stuff was happening, I ended up getting involved in a network marketing company selling weight loss products. And I ended up being trained by Jim Rohn.
Yeah. Jim Rohn.
Yeah. So I was exposed to all this stuff. Then when I was in the US, I got exposed to all Tony Robbins stuff. So I started studying all this self-help stuff while all this was happening and started to apply it into my life. And so when I got into the airline, I became a bit of an expert in human factors and crew resource management, which is studying aircraft accidents from a human factors point of view. So 85% of accidents happen because of the human factor. So the question is, what went wrong with the pilot that caused him to have the accident? Right. And so I was coming in, giving my perspective, and then we had an issue in the airline because we had a lot of foreign pilots. And so there was cross-cultural communication in the cockpit. So I developed some training models for that so that we could all get along together in the cockpit, even if we were coming from different nationalities. And then I went on to work for other airlines, and I have flown with pilots from 65 different countries. And it's been great because I've had to learn to communicate very quickly and above all, to try and understand what the other guy is trying to tell me.
Yeah.
Not what he's saying, what he's trying to say.
Right.
And that is really, really important, especially when you're flying at, 800 miles an hour, 500 miles an hour, and your brain has to be ahead of the airplane. You're in 3 dimensions or 4 dimensions, as I call it. Your brain's got to think quick, and you're working with this other guy and the team in the back, the flight attendants and that, and and the air traffic control. So you've got all these different elements, and it's not like you're in an office where you can sit a minute and stop and think. No, this thing's moving through the air very quickly. And so you've got to think quick. And so coordination between the different members of the team is key. And that takes some refinement and training.
Well, and you obviously have done well with that because if I understand correctly, you're in the media all the time.
Yeah, at the moment, yes. Yeah.
And ideas around aviation and so forth. And so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, because I've never stopped reading. I mean, I was lucky enough. When I went to the international school, I had an English teacher in 5th grade called Elizabeth Skinner. And she put this seed in my mind and in my heart about reading.
Right.
She said, read. And so I find myself even today reading 4, sometimes more than 4 books a month. And I just got this hunger for reading. I keep reading. And I've kept that up all the way.
And you have a lot of energy. I mean, you're just like, it's contagious, man. It's awesome. All right. So so you're always studying, you're always learning. All right. So you've written several books. I've got one here.
Yep.
Got another one here.
Yep.
Your wife, Sylvia, right? Is that her name?
Correct, yep.
She's written a couple books. She helped you with this book?
No, yeah, she helped me with a health book because Health for Flies is our recent book. Now, that's basically what happened is throughout the years flying as an airline pilot, there's a lot of health challenges. I mean, jet lag is the famous one. Fatigue. A lot of accidents these days happen because pilots are fatigued. So as I'm flying, my wife discovers that the food on the airplane is actually cooked 1 month before the flight. Then it's put in a freezer. Oh. Yeah, then they put all these chemicals in it to make it taste nice. And they put it in the freezer. And they put the meal on the airplane about an hour before the flight. And then they stick it in this oven and they defrost it and they put it on your plate. Now, if you're flying once a month, no problem. If you're flying 4 or 5 times a week or a day, as some flights I was doing, I was flying 5 days on, 4 days off. And the 5 days on, I was flying 4 flights every day. So so you don't want to be eating that stuff. Yeah. So I started to bring food from home. Plus, my wife, my family, we all follow a plant-based diet. And it's been almost 17 years now. We've been following the plant-based diet. And there are many reasons why we started down that route. Mainly because my wife had arthritis and the herbalist she was training under said, you need to go on a vegan diet or plant-based diet. And within 2 weeks, she cleared up her arthritis. So then we became students of natural health. And we went to so many seminars, read so many books. And so, your mind starts to develop in a certain way. And you feel a lot better, which is why you ask the high energy. It's because of the way I eat. And so I would bring this vegan food with me on the flights. So, the flight attendant would come in and say, tea, coffee? I don't drink tea or coffee. So none of that. Oh, what meal would you like, Captain? No, I've got my own food. Oh, your own food? Oh, that's strange food. What's that? Some guys used to say to me, are you eating your bird food today? Because I eat a lot of sprouted seeds. And so I started to explain why I didn't eat the aeroplane food and why I ate what I ate and what it did to the body. And so I get everybody starts saying to me, why don't you write a book? Why don't you write a book? For one airline I worked for, the airport was on one side of the road, and on the other side of the highway is this shopping mall. And my wife was assistant manager of the health food store in the shopping mall. So as I'm telling all the flight attendants and my colleagues about why I wasn't eating airplane food, they're then visiting my wife, who's then prescribing this herb, that herb, and so we're keeping all the airline healthy.
That's awesome.
So in the end, after about 10 years, I said to Sylvia, you know what? We need to write this book. Because so many accidents are happening now, and when I study the accident, it's down to the human factor, and the human factor is the pilot was fatigued. So what can the pilot do to manage his or her fatigue? Right. So it's not only what you do on the flight, it's what you do in between flights. That's important as well. So understanding, the human body as a whole, how to keep your body clock in sync, and all sorts of other things that we share in the book.
No, this is filled with. I mean, and I love how it's got it seems, it's easy to read. It's got the visuals. It's very succinct. I mean, it's just wow.
Yeah, and the reason for that, TJ, is because, pilots read a lot of manuals every year, and so do the flight attendants, and it's boring, thick manuals. So I thought, we need a book that's fun. So let's get a cartoonist to work and develop the whole, to make it fun, an easy read. So, Moreno's an absolute genius, the guy who did all the illustration. That airplane, which is a flying vegetable, airplane made of vegetables, it's very, very clever. He used to work for Disney, so he's very well experienced. Yeah, he's very clever guy. Very, very clever. Yeah.
All right, so with all I'm curious. So for the listeners and the watchers who are watching this interview, you tried a lot of things. You stayed on course with what it was that you wanted to stay in the aviation industry. You wanted to fly. You wanted to be a pilot. How many years were you a pilot?
Well, I'm still a pilot. My license is active and everything. But I started flying when I was 17. So I got my pilot's license before my driver's license. I'm now 48. So I've been flying for a long time. I've got over 8,000 hours. I haven't been flying as much as I used to since I quit my career as an airline pilot, and now I'm in the private jet industry. I set up my own aircraft sales company 5.5 years ago, which I then left a few months ago to pursue some other aviation projects, which I'm working on right now, and still doing a few sales as I'm transiting into this new project. So I managed to combine my passion for business and my passion for planes, and at the same time keep flying. So now I pretty much choose when I want to fly and what plane I want to fly. So I don't fly as much, but I still, get the enjoyment of flying a plane. But at the same time, the business aspect is important because it allows me to use that other talent that I have, and at the same time give my family a better lifestyle.
You bet. Okay, so here's the question. What advice would you give other entrepreneurs or people trying to achieve their goals, or maybe they have the ideal dream life they want to move toward, but they run into obstacle after obstacle after obstacle after obstacle? What advice would you have for them? Because, you've had to make some turns along your path as well. So any thoughts on that?
Okay, well, people go to seminars and they go on YouTube and they look at goal setting workshops and whatnot. What I discovered as you go and you do all the Tony Robbins stuff and Stephen Covey and Jim Rohn and Zig Ziglar or whoever you want to listen to, all very great material. But I noticed that sometimes there are some blocks that stop people. So when I wrote my first book, Your Attitude Determines Your Altitude, I came up with this concept of the cube. And being a big Star Trek fan, and that's one of the things that influenced me when I was growing up, and sort of this mind of becoming Captain Kirk sort of thing, there's this race called the Borg in Star Trek: The Next Generation, and they fly around the universe in these cubes, and they're a mix between humans and machines, and their minds are all linked to each other. In a way, today we are through these phones and social media, and the way the media is trying to make everybody think in the same way. So I noticed that a lot of times there are things that stop us from finding out our talents and developing those talents. And I think two things that stop people from achieving success is, number one, they don't believe in themselves, so they lack confidence. And number two, they don't aim high enough. They don't go big enough. Okay? So the question is, why don't they aim high enough? And why aren't they confident? So I came up with the 6 sides of the cube. Okay? And I've recently, in my original book, which was written over 12, 13 years ago, I'm now writing the 3rd edition. And I've come up with the word action. Okay? So action. Okay? And now each word is one side of the cube. So A stands for atmosphere, meaning the people around you. Okay? So is the environment around you, the people around you, motivating you to greatness or not? And I had a situation when I was growing up, my English grandmother said to me, Fabrizio, you don't want to be a pilot. Your father is a very successful hairstylist. He's friends with Vidal Sassoon. That's the path you need to go down. And I said, I'm not interested. So what I discovered is you got 2 types of dream stealers. Those that don't want you to succeed, okay? The evil ones, and they're easy to recognize. But then you've got the ones that love you. My grandmother Louise loved me. The reason why she was telling me become a hairstylist is because it was an easy path for me. My dad knew everybody. He just needed to pick the phone up, like he did for my uncle. He picked the phone up and said, Vidal, my brother Massimo wants to be a hairstylist. You got a spot in the school in London? Yeah, no problem, sending along Monday morning. He would have done the same for me. Okay? While anybody else knocking on the door would have to go through, a bit more, a few hurdles before they got into the school. I didn't want to do that. So I didn't listen to the second type of dream stealer, which are those that love you. And fortunately, my dad backed me. Maybe he would have liked me to take over the business. But he remembered that when he left Santa Maria, Nonna Tomasina said, go after your dream, tune into the successful people. And so my dad said, that's what I did. That's what my son needs to do. So if his dream is flying, that's what he needs to do. And
that's really, let me pause you right there. That's really good, because I remember when I was writing my first book in the backseat of my car, my world was falling apart, and I told people that I was writing a book. The family members that love me would say, they wouldn't say this verbally, but they would say it in their countenance, like, who are you to write a book? Now, you forward that till now, having written several books, they say, when's your next book coming out? Right? So they've shifted from that place of a little bit of doubt. So sometimes people that can't see it for you try to project that belief onto you, which isn't accurate. And as long as you believe in yourself, like you're saying, stay focused, don't buy into that negative garbage, right? Eventually, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy and you achieve what you want. Okay, keep going. I know you have more thoughts.
So atmosphere is the A. C, we're spelling the word action here. C stands for cash, meaning money. Okay? Now, we live in a world where anybody with money is seen as evil. I mean, you've got President Trump in America, who everybody seems to attack him. And I think they attack him not because of what he says, because he's a rich guy. He's got billions. If he'd been a poor guy like Barack Obama, they would have loved him. But because he's the rich guy, okay, and he's the son of a rich guy, and he became even richer than his dad, everybody's attacking him. So we tend to live in a society where anybody that has money is seen as evil. Now, the reason, and I work with a lot of wealthy people, and I can tell you, most of the wealthy people you see on TV, you read about in the newspapers and that, the real wealthy people you don't read about. Okay? I'd say 97% of the wealthy people out there, you never heard of. You probably walked past them in the grocery store the other day. Okay? Sure. You were standing in the cash register, the guy behind you is a multi-billionaire. He's got his own private jet. He's nowhere to be seen in the newspapers and stuff like that. I come across a lot of people like that. So there's a negative view of cash. And then the other thing is, people don't understand where money's coming from. And so I went in to study, because I always ask myself, this money I've got in my hand, where does it come from? Who decides how many notes are printed? I mean, now a lot of it is on the screen, okay? So I looked into the whole money thing, and that taught me a few things. Like, for example, when you go to the bank to get a mortgage to buy a house, the bank doesn't have the money in the bank. Your signature generates the money on the screen, and then the bank charges you for it. Now, you think, what a ridiculous system. So basically, what it is money is created out of thin air. Okay? And the bank has the legal ability, or whatever you want to call it, to do that. Okay? So money is just a form of energy. And if you're going to use money to do good things, and there's a lot of people out there using money to do good things, it's just to keep it quiet. I mean, my family and I, we do a lot for a lot of people, and these people don't even know we do these things. I mean, sure. Secret Santas and at Christmas time, and you know, envelopes through the door with cash in the middle of the night, and and I'm not saying this to brag. I'm just saying I don't like people to know, or I don't like certain people to know I helped them. The important thing is that they receive the help, and then you see the comment on Facebook the next day, an angel put a envelope through the door, and you know that this family is struggling, and you want to help them, because what happens if you go out and you openly say, I'm going to give you $1,000, then they feel like they owe you money, or they owe you something, and that's not good for them. So just let that go. They don't know who gave them the money. They know they need it. They know what they can use it for, and off they go. And so understanding money, or cash, as the C is, understanding cash and how it works, and the fact that money is a form of energy. So you can generate an idea, and my son did this with his YouTube channel. He had an idea. He made some videos with his Legos. He posted them. He got 250,000 hits. Then he started to make money with the videos. And then someone knocked on the door and asked him to make a video using Lego figures for his company. Wow. So my son got paid through PayPal. And then he routed it to this card that he has so he could spend it. Okay. But what happened is he didn't use a bank. There were no banks involved. And he basically created money out of thin air. He had the idea and turned the idea into money that he could use to buy something. And so I talked him through. I said, Benjamin, do you realize what you've just done? And that's how the whole money thing works. We go to school and we're taught to study hard, get a degree, and then go and get a job. We're not taught entrepreneurship. And here we move into the next letter, which is T for tuition. Yep. Tuition, education. Okay, the education system was built based on a Prussian system. Now the Prussians were into war, army, and then the next thing was school was built to produce factory workers. So that's the way the system works. I mean, my kids are all homeschooled, so they've never been to school. They're homeschooled today with all the apps and technology that there is Khan Academy and all stuff like that. It's a lot easier to homeschool than it was 20 years ago, but they're learning stuff that they will need for the future. And above all, as parents, it allows you to spend more time with your kids, discover their talents, and help them develop their talents. Why should I sit my son in a maths class or in an art class if they're no good at art and they're no good at maths, and the guy in the maths class could be a fantastic artist? Because this is what happens. You go to school and you're in so many different classes and you don't do well. And now your confidence is low. But in you, you've got this talent for painting. But that's only one class out of the many classes. So you're rubbish at everything else, but you're good at painting. But the everything else knocks your confidence. So when you graduate, you don't go after the artist job or the artist path, because you haven't got the confidence to do it, and you're not going to aim big enough because you don't think you're good enough. And so the system is not tailored for the 21st century. It's tailored for the 20th, if not 19th century. And for entrepreneurship, and what I think someone needs to do education-wise, find out what your talents are as soon as you can, and then focus. I mean, totally. I'm a terrible singer. I can't sing. So I'm not going to try and become a professional singer, because it's not my talent.
That's right.
So,
but those who identify where maybe they have some leanings, some predisposition, some talents, and man, if those are their strengths, if they will go after it and work at it and nurture it, I'm telling you, man, doors will open.
Yeah.
But you're right. Many people, I mean, how many people have you met over the years? I know I've met thousands over the years. After my speeches and so forth, they come up and someone at 56 years old or 62 years old is saying, hey, TJ, what you said is really inspiring. Man, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do. Now, that's not to say that they haven't lived a good life. Yeah. But that is to say, wow, many of us, there's more in us that we're not using because we don't follow our talents and our abilities. And so going back to your tuition,
Yeah, so ACT is ACT, okay? So the atmosphere, the cash, the tuition, and then we go into the energy side, ION, the word ION, okay? I stands for information. And information, media, meaning social media, mainstream media, fake news, whatever you want to call it. I mean, we saw recently, last year, in the UK and in the US, we had some major political shift happen.
Yeah.
Here in the UK, we were asked to vote if we wanted to stay in the European Union or leave. Okay?
Right.
The majority of the people voted to leave. It was a big shock for all the media because everybody was convinced that the English people were going to vote to stay in the European Union. And it completely switched. But I watched something happen. I noticed on social media there were more and more people discussing why we needed to leave than stay. But if you switch the television on, everybody that was being interviewed was saying, no, we're going to stay because of this, because of that. Leaving is a bad idea, blah, 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 blah. So if you followed the mainstream media, you read the newspapers, you knew 100% that the UK was going to stay in the European Union. But if you listened to the people and you went out on the street and spoke to the people on the train, on the bus, in the market, or you watched what was going on on Facebook with people making their own videos and talking to each other and doing forums and interviews like this and whatever, you saw a whole different story. Same in the United States. You switch the television on, Hillary Clinton's going to win the election. Donald Trump will never become the nominee for the Republicans, and then he becomes a nominee. Then he's never going to become president. Hillary's going to win. Newsweek even published the front cover of the magazine, Madam President. It was already out in the stores, and then suddenly, surprise, surprise. But if you followed social media and you went out on the streets, or when I spoke to people, I remember speaking to a client of mine 3 weeks before. He was in North Carolina, and he said to me, Fabrizio, 2 weeks ago, Hillary Clinton came to my town to give a speech, and 300 people turned up. Last week, Donald Trump came, and 15,000 people turned up. So 15,000 people turned up for Trump, and 300 for Clinton. So I don't quite see why or how she's going to win. And I'm hearing all these stories. But you switch CNN, BBC, everybody's saying. So what happened? What happened? It's telling you that the media are not telling you the real story. They're not telling you what is really happening. And so I said to myself, well, how can I find out what really is happening? And this is where the school, in a way, doesn't teach people to think. And the media are not making people think. Okay? Let's think through this. Okay? So I started to look into alternative sources of media and try to tune it. And then, I listen to BBC. I watch news channels from different, because I get different channels from different countries here. So I watch the Japanese news, the Chinese news, well, it's done in English, the Turkish news, the Russian news, the English news, the American news. And I listen to them all. Then I go online and I check a few websites. And I spend maybe an hour and a half in the morning reading up on all these things. And then I make up my own mind. So I think about what I've seen and what I've read. And then I process it.
Yeah, of course.
But most people don't do that. And so information, be careful where you're getting your information from. Question your information. Question the sources. Look at both sides of the coin.
Okay? Got it. What's O?
Next. O stands for optimism. Optimism, mindset, your attitude. Okay? So that is so important. So what can I do to fuel my optimism? What can I do to see the glass half empty? Okay? What reasons are there for this thing actually happening? And the optimism comes when we are doing something that we love, when we're doing something that we enjoy, that we're good at. Okay? That gives you that confidence. And so that's where optimism comes in. And then the N couldn't but not stand for nutrition or natural healing, that word. Okay? So the interesting thing is all these action, all these letters, atmosphere is something outside of you. Okay? The money is outside of you. The tuition, the education is outside of you. The information is outside of you. The nutrition is outside of you. It's information coming from outside to the inside. But the optimism comes from within. And if you want to break through with your atmosphere, with your cash, with the money, with the tuition, and with the information or nutrition, it starts with the mind.
Totally.
And my wife had cancer a few years ago. And the doctor said, you have to be operating in 48 hours. She had a ovarian cyst with cancerous growth. And she received a special blessing. And after the blessing, all was said in the blessing was that she would know what to do when she opened her eyes. And she felt she needed to find this Dr. Christopher she was studying under. She said, he has a formula that will dissolve a cyst. She went, she found the formula. We bought the herbs. She went on a raw vegan diet. strict raw vegan food for 3 months. We hired a personal trainer to work out with her 3 times a week. Within 6 weeks, the cyst went from 12 centimeters to 6. After 3 months, the cyst had gone completely, and she was completely cancer-free. But in saying all this, we then discover something else, which is a big block that stops people, and that's emotions. And we discovered a thing called the emotion code, which then has evolved into the body code, developed by this doctor called Dr. Bradley Nelson. And he's a chiropractor, and he discovered that our emotions, often enough, emotions that we experience in childhood, or even inherited emotions from ancestors that can go back as far as 12, 13, 14 generations, can stop us from achieving that greatness. And so he helps people at a quantum level, from an energy perspective, through time, work on removing those blocks. And one of the blocks that happens that people put is they put an energy block around their hearts called the heart wall. And so my wife and I discovered this. So we studied this. I actually interviewed Bradley Nelson for my podcast show. He put us in contact with one of his trained people. We went through some sessions on this body code. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. So understanding the cube and the different sides of the cube, and also tapping into the emotion code and body code that Dr. Nelson has developed. So obviously you've got to watch what you eat. You've got to put yourself in environments with positive people, like my dad did with Vidal Sassoon, the non-Thomasina rule, hang out with the successful people, understand how money really works. You've got to come at it from many different angles. It's not just, I want to do that, let me go for it. Because if you don't remove the things that are going to stop you, the blocks, and often enough, these blocks can be hidden emotions. I mean, I had experiences during the...
True, but let me just say this. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes people talk themselves out of doing the thing because of that thing they fear or that obstacle that they may have. You can't fully know what those obstacles are, I don't think, until you take some sort of action. Whether it's large or small doesn't matter. Just, you've got to hit a roadblock. And then we have to look at that roadblock as an opportunity to grow and to evolve and rise above it, not to shrink below it.
But you've got to know that the roadblock is there. I mean, during the sessions, during the body code with this lady called Holly Wall from St. George in Utah, stuff came up from my childhood, or even from, I discovered, she said, she's talking about my grandfather, my Italian grandfather, and she said to me, he was gassed. Gassed? I don't know anything. So I get on the phone the next day to my uncle, and I said, do you recall Nonno Antonio, Grandfather Antonio? I know he was a prisoner of war in Germany during the Second World War. Do you recall him ever telling you he had been gassed? Yes. I didn't know that. This woman picked it up and she said, that toxic gassing, he was gassed, went on to your dad and then came on to you, and it's in a way creating a blockage of some sort inside you. And then it was removed. All this kind of stuff's coming up. And it's very interesting because these are because you find yourself going out there and you're going for something and you're doing all the right things according to the book, but you're still not getting there. You're thinking, what is it? There's something stopping. What is it? What is it? And so you have to tackle it from many different angles. But unfortunately, if you go to school, do what the schools tell you, switch the television on, believe what BBC or CNN are telling you, you're not going to find out what your talents are, number one. And number two, if you do find out, you're not going to have the ability and the motivation and the confidence to embrace your talents and just go for it.
Right.
And so that's why it's so important to come from these different angles. So that's why the whole cube concept that I developed, and being aware of this cube is very, very important. And most people aren't.
Okay, but let's say someone doesn't have access to someone like Bradley Nelson.
Oh, there's plenty of practitioners worldwide, and you do the sessions via Skype, so you don't have to be in front of them. Face to face. You can, like we are now. So there's people all over the world that do this. But even going to a craniosacral therapist, where we first started off. Because my wife started off, then I did a session, and the lady said to me, your biological clock is out of sync. That's because of all these night flights I've been doing. Oh. So she realigned it for me. So something like craniotherapy therapy, even acupuncture or reflexology, even tapping. They do tapping these days. Yep. These are all things that will release these emotions that are blocking you. So in Chinese medicine, they talk about the meridians. Okay, even in martial arts, you study the meridians where the energy flows in the body. Okay, and yoga is a great one. When you're doing yoga, I remember when I started yoga, there's certain muscles I didn't even know I had, and then I'm feeling really stiff on one end. And if I hadn't if instructor hadn't put me in a certain position, I would have never recognized this pain. And she said, no, just stay for a minute, and then the next day you try again, and the pain's gone. So what's happening is a lot of emotional blockages can be unblocked by doing something like yoga, or acupuncture, or reflexology, or craniosacral therapy, or the emotion code. Because what happens is the emotions will create energy blocks in your body, which will then stop you from performing at your best.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. So what advice? We're coming out on time. I just think with the time, what suggestion do you have for people that do have those setbacks, right? Atmosphere is important. You talk about cash, you talk about tuition, you talk about information, nutrition, but you said ultimately optimism is the one thing that it starts and ends with. It comes from within. That's the one thing you have control over. How do you view obstacles when they come up?
Well, when I see an obstacle, obviously, first question is, how do I get over it or under it or remove it or whatever? So if I can handle it, I go for it. If I can't handle it, I look for somebody that has handled it in the past. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be someone I know. Today with the internet, we have access to lots of information. The best university in the world is YouTube. Every lecture you need to see is on YouTube. You can go on there and, got a problem with your car, go in there, problem with your computer, problem with the sink, pipe has burst, you need to fix it. You go on YouTube, you find the solution. So same there. So if you're facing an obstacle, whatever type of obstacle it is, go online and try and find the solution. Okay? Find someone. You may sometimes speak to the person one-to-one. It may be somebody in your family can help you. Let's start at home. Start at home. See if anybody in your home can help you. Anybody in your neighborhood or in your church or in your school or in your company. And then if not, look online. Look in the bookstore. The information is out there somewhere. Even pray. Praying helps. Praying is a great way of finding solutions to problems. Prayer, meditation, all that kind of thing will lead you to the person or the book or the video, whatever you need to help you, give you that piece of information you need in order to be able to overcome that obstacle.
All right. That's awesome. Hey, listen, for all you listeners that are out there, I wish we had more time because we could go on and on. I tell you, Fabrizio. Make sure that you get his books. And I know that you're working on another book that we've been talking about because our company, Aylesbury Publishing, will likely be teaming up with you on that book. And we're looking forward to that. So we have some things going on together with that. So anything in closing that you would like to share with the audience in terms of, it could be anything that you're thinking about?
Well, I would say, I believe that we received a certain type of training before we came to Earth. And we are here today as spiritual beings living a human experience. So we come to Earth as little children, and the whole scope of our life is to discover what we were taught before and remember what we were taught and then develop those talents. And so we need to sort of tune into that. Now, how you do that, everybody has their own way. But you've been sent to Earth to accomplish a mission. You're here on a mission, okay? Find out what that mission is and then go for it.
That's really good. That's really good. And that's truth right there. Find out what your mission is and go for it. Despite the obstacles, despite the fears, figure out ways through resources to unblock them, but go after it.
Because if God gave you those talents, He's also given you the ability to use them. And if that obstacle is in front of you, you have the ability within to overcome that obstacle. It may mean working out in the gym for 3 months, solid every day, to build that muscle, to lift that weight. But, we all have to put the work in. I always say to my kids, I say, remember, God will always help. And I remember this picture of Jesus. And it's really, really interesting because there's a door, okay? And Jesus is knocking at this door, but there's no handle on his side. The handle is on our side. So we have to let him in. So we have to let this greatness in. The greatness is there. But, we always need to make the first step. God, Jesus, however you believe in, he or she or whatever energy you believe in will make that step if we make our step first. So sitting and complaining and pointing fingers gets you nowhere. You need to ask yourself, what is the next step that I can make? And you don't have to think about climbing Mount Everest. What's the next step I need to make And then those 1,555 steps, which will take me all the way to the top of Mount Everest, I need to worry about the next step. And that's all you need to do. I remember reading a book written by Bear Grylls, who was the youngest person to climb Mount Everest. And he said, it's all I thought about as I was climbing those last few meters was the next step, the next step, the next step. And that's how I achieved my goal of climbing Everest. And
there
he's
we
right.
go. That is awesome. Thank you, Fabrizio, for the time that we've been able to share. We look forward to sharing this with our audiences. It's really been great, insightful. You've shared a lot of wisdom and truth. And so, hey, we really appreciate the time. Thanks for being on this little interview. It's been great.
Thank you, TJ. Thank you for having me.
All right, what'd you think? Thanks for watching. All right, I hope you got something out of this interview. I know I did. It was a good reminder of some things that maybe you already know, but with his cube analogy and with some of the other things that he said, maybe he got you to think about something a different way. And that's the value of bringing in these, guests that are successful in their own right. And so, listen, if you've watched this on my YouTube channel, hey, and you're not a subscriber, I invite you to subscribe. If you listen to this on my podcast on iTunes called Unleash Your Greatness Within and you haven't subscribed, then I invite you to subscribe. And listen, if you like something that was said or shared, hey, leave a comment, right? Star it. If you like what you have seen, hey, on any of my videos or any of my podcasts, hey, do me a favor. It means everything. If you'll just star it or leave a quick review, that feedback is powerful. All right, I wish you the very best, and may the best of your past be the worst of your future. May you unleash your greatness within.